Welcome to Thursday's edition of COVID-19. While there has been a decline in the daily tally, concerns are high as cluster infections remain rampant across the community. We'll also take a look at the growing disparity in vaccine distribution across the globe later on. I have our Kwon up first with the broader pandemic coverage. So let's start with the latest here in Korea.
Yes, Sunny, there has been a drop by almost 100 infections from a day ago, with 680 infections reported as of 12 a.m. And that's 650 domestic transmissions and 30 cases from abroad. So in total, Korea has over 121,000 COVID-19 infections with a death toll at 1,825. And also out of the roughly 8,700 people that are currently under treatment or in quarantine, 157 are in severe or critical condition. Now, if you take a look at our graph now, we are seeing ups and downs from the high 400s to the high 700s. And with that, the average number of daily domestic infections in the past week stands at 638. That's a slight decline from the figure we had yesterday. And onto our map, the capital Seoul reported again over 200 infections, almost 200 in Gyeonggi-do province, and we're also seeing a rise here in both Busan and Ulsan, now both standing in the 40s. So with no place around the country safe from the virus, the government may need to raise social distancing measures or rules. It's actually going to make an announcement on Friday regarding which social distancing measures will take effect beginning Monday for the upcoming 3 weeks.
I see. Meanwhile, so on the vaccination front, I understand authorities have come up with a way to deal with no-shows.
Right, Sunny. The government has been stressing the importance of reducing the amount of doses that have to be thrown out, as they cannot be stored for too long once the bottles are opened. So the solution to that is that anyone, including those that are not yet subject to vaccinations, can get a chance of being vaccinated in case registered vaccine recipients do not show up on schedule or have to delay their shots due to health conditions. Now, citizens can put themselves on a waiting list, but also people who are visiting medical centers for other reasons can be asked by doctors on site if they want to get vaccinated for COVID-19, again, in the case of no-shows. And let's also get a update on the figures of the vaccination so far. 2.8 million people have received at least one shot, and with over 220,700 people who got that shot yesterday, that's the highest daily figure we've seen so far. So the goal of the government to reach 3 million shots by the end of April can be achieved as early as on Friday with this pace.
Right, well, that's good to know. Meanwhile, on the international front, so we are looking at frightening figures over in India yet again.
Right, Sunny. As of Wednesday, India reported over 360,000 cases of COVID-19 in just a day, amid the second major wave there worsening every day. And also with almost 3,300 fatalities reported in a 24-hour span. That marks the highest official daily death toll, which, however, is widely thought to be even higher, as keeping an accurate count is a difficult task in the country of 1.3 billion people. Especially outbreaks in smaller cities in many cases are being unreported. Now, hospitals, oxygen supply, and even vaccination registration programs are collapsing, with more and more countries having started to offer aid. And if you take a look at the numbers now, India has over 18.3 million cases, and as of noon Korea time, it has again hit a record high of daily infections at more than 370,000 cases. Meanwhile, some are saying that the total number may even be at 50 million. And meanwhile, European countries, the total count in Europe has just hit 50 million. Let's also go over to the fatalities here. India, with that record high of daily deaths, has now hit past 200,000 total fatalities. And the world now has also surpassed over 150,000 infections in total. Those are the updates I have for now, but I'll see you back after the briefing. Sunny?
All right, so thank you for now. Right then, back here on the local front, our inoculation drive is picking up pace, with military service members now lining up to get their shots. For more on this, I have our Kim Jian here in the studio with me. Welcome, Jian.
Hello again.
Right, so this recent rollout comes earlier than planned, Jian.
Sure. The South Korean military has started vaccinating service members about a week before schedule due to recent cluster infections at military bases. For 2 weeks starting Wednesday, all service members over the age of 30 are eligible to receive the AstraZeneca shots on a voluntary basis. Inoculations are being prioritized for those stationed at the front line and in remote areas, command and communication centers, guard posts in the demilitarized zone, as well as those stationed in aircraft and sailors on board Navy vessels.
I feel relieved that I'm getting the vaccine shot. Starting Wednesday, military service members aged 30 or older are eligible to receive COVID-19 vaccinations. I hope a lot of people get vaccinated in order for the military to do its job in protecting the country by returning to its vibrant state. The ROK Army will do its best for the safe transfer and management of the vaccines, monitor post-inoculation side effects, and ultimately reach its goal to complete first dose vaccinations by early May.
And the Defense Ministry said it will administer the first doses to 126,000 military personnel and civilian workers in the military at military hospitals and barracks by early May. And since most of the officers at senior levels in the chain of command are above the age of 30, the ministry says vaccinations could prevent the spread of the virus among commuting officers.
I see, Chian. What about service members under the age of 30 then?
Well, consultations are underway to devise an inoculation plan to service members under the age of 30, estimated at some 455,000 people. They have yet to decide which vaccine to administer, especially with the use of AstraZeneca shots being suspended for that age group due to safety concerns involving blood clots.
Our vaccination plan for service members aged 30 or younger, including the timeline and other details, will be fleshed out once we have determined which type of vaccine to use, which is undecided at the moment. We're continuing to work with the KDCA to work out the details.
Well, so far, the South Korean military has reported a total of 780 coronavirus cases, of which 86 are still receiving treatment. The total number of confirmed cases spiked by about 10% compared to last week, mainly due to recent cluster infections on a Navy vessel stationed in Chine and an Air Force base in Sachon.
Yeah, so I heard. Chian, tell us more about these outbreaks then.
Sure. Among the 84 sailors on board the Navy vessel, 33 sailors have tested positive for the virus last week, marking the country's first cluster infection on a Navy ship. It was also found that one of the family members of a sailor was confirmed with the virus, but only after the sailor had boarded the ship. So despite rigorous efforts at prevention, Navy vessels pose a high-risk environment since sailors serve and train together in close proximity and spend long periods of time out at sea. It's also difficult to carry out COVID-19 testing while the sailors are on maritime duty, which makes the problem all the more challenging.
Right, and from sea to land now. What about infections at the Air Force Base?
Well, Seoul's Defense Ministry said 9 service members at an Air Force base in Sachon were confirmed with COVID-19 earlier this week, prompting the military to test some 1,600 service members stationed there at the base. And the infection route is still unknown, but reports say an infected military officer had played a soccer match with some 20 other service members, and the majority of them were not wearing masks during the game. And this goes against the prevention guidelines set by local authorities and the military, which recommends people to wear the mask when outdoors if distancing of 2 meters or more cannot be maintained. The Air Force said the service members involved could be reprimanded upon further investigation.
I see. All right, Chian, as always, thank you very much for that coverage.
Thank you.
Right, it's time now for the regular briefing on the COVID-19 situation here in Korea for this Thursday.
First of all, we have Commissioner Chung Eun-young for the briefing. I am Commissioner of the KDCA, and let us now begin our regular briefing for April 29th. First of all, here are some updates on our status on the COVID-19 vaccination. Yesterday alone, we had over 220,729 people receiving their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, with the total number standing at about 2,808,794. And we have about 5.5% of the people eligible for their first dose having the vaccine so far, and this is also the highest daily tally. And we believe that with this pace, as of today, we believe that our accumulated number of recipients could surpass 3 million. And the task force is currently prioritizing the safety rollout of the vaccines, and we are also recommending all of the people who have who are feeling ill, we are asking them to suspend or postpone their vaccination. And please also note that we are also advising the healthcare facilities to also utilize the leftover vaccine doses to others instead of discarding them at all. And also we ask you to get your vaccinations on the day of the registration in advance. And however, if you do not feel well on that specific date, please inform the vaccination center or the designated hospital, and also inform them that you are not feeling well, and please get the vaccines when you have great conditions. And yesterday alone, we had about 250,000 more Pfizer doses of the vaccines that have arrived here in Korea, and we have more than 4 million doses that have arrived here in Korea so far. And during the next few weeks, we also believe that we will be receiving the rest of the Pfizer doses until June, and we believe that this will help us contribute to and achieving the goal of achieving our target rates by end of June as well. And here are some concerns of the blood clots involving the AstraZeneca vaccines. And as for the AstraZeneca vaccines, we have seen rare cases of the blood clots within 4 weeks, after 4 weeks of a post-inoculation. And this is involving it is a rare type of blood clots, and also we believe that they are also can also erupt and compared to other blood clots that can erupt from long-distance flights. We believe that the cases or the frequency is very rare, and we believe that there is no need to be too much nervous about this side effect. However, it is also very important that we take particular precautions. So after about 4 weeks, within the 4-week period after the post-inoculation, if you have loss of sight, or if you have swollen legs, or if you feel also blood or swollenness or bleeding in other areas aside from the injected area, we ask you to consult a doctor and an expert. And also we believe that it is very important to note what symptoms that may accompany the vaccines. And we believe that this itself is our first step in returning to a state of normalcy. And we believe it is very important that you receive your vaccines on the eligible date. And we have also some guidelines for those people who have been fully vaccinated. And as we roll out the vaccines, we also have our guideline. If a person who have been fully vaccinated, if this person comes into contact with a confirmed patient, and if this person also has tested negative for the PCR testing, this person will not be subject to mandatory isolation for 2 weeks. And also after leaving the country, after getting the fully inoculated, we will also have this person not subject to the mandatory 2-week quarantine. However, this person will be subject to active monitoring. However, we have some exemptions for the countries where the South African variants are rapidly spreading, and therefore the people who are returning from these countries, we will still mandate them under the 14-day mandatory quarantine period. And so we believe that for the fully inoculated people, we ask you to get the PCR testings even if you are under this mandatory self-quarantine period. And if we accumulate more data, we believe that these guidelines can also be changed in near future. And as for the people who are under active monitoring, we ask you to note that you still have some risks and certain risks of infection. So we ask you to comply with the basic quarantine measures. If you breach these measures, please note that you can be transformed and transferred as the subject to a mandatory quarantine. And these guidelines will be effective starting from May 5th. And also, if those people who have been receiving their fully inoculated at other countries, we also will have a devised plan. We will be devising plan so that they can submit related certificates, and we will also adjust these measures depending on the coordination with other countries. And as for the more details, we will be briefing you in the near future or providing you with detailed press kits. And next, we also have the Korea's Ministry of Food and Drug Safety, which has approved under conditions the self-test kits. And here are some details. And as for the self-test kits, the principles are as follows. This kit is also subject to the approval of the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety. And if this person who has symptoms of respiratory diseases cannot get tested for certain reasons, he or she will be opted to utilize these test kits, self-test kits that is. And if one has tested positive for the self-test using the self-test kit, he or she needs to immediately visit a screening clinic and get the PCR testings to verify if he or she has been infected with COVID-19. And even if the self-test kits have tested negative, it is very important that there could be some possibilities of a fake negative testings outcome. So we ask you to monitor your conditions and comply with the basic quarantine rules as well. And also, before you check the PCR testing results, you need to also keep compliance to the mandatory quarantine measures as well. And in order to facilitate more effective testing measures, please also be fully aware of the manuals that are given to you, that are provided to you along with the test kits. And as for the user manual, there are some details. And if there is a surpass of the response time, and if the test kits has been polluted, we also could have some possibilities of fake positive results. So we need to take also a cautious note of that. And if you are testing yourself with the self-test kits, please also ventilate your space and also make sure that the area is clean. And after using the test kits, please also seal it and then throw it away. And also please note that if you have tested positive for the test negative with the self-test kit, please also note that you need to ask the public officials to discard this after sealing it completely, because you could have some virus infections stemming from this test kit. And we will also provide detailed guidelines and user manuals on our website. So if you are using these self-test kits, please also make sure that you are fully aware of these steps and procedures. And next, we also have the big data establishment plan that we have right now in relation to the COVID-19. And we are also cooperating with the National Health Insurance scheme, and we are also establishing and signing an MOU. And using this as a step, we are also going to utilize by linking and syncing the data that we have at the KDCA, as well as the data that is compiled by the Health Insurance Agency. And we are also going to look at a supervising scheme where we could look at the COVID-19 cases, and we will also bring up new databases regarding the health of these COVID-19 patients, as well as those people who have been infected. And we will be carrying out co-studies going forward as well. And with the big data establishment, we believe that we can bolster our monitoring and we can also ensure the safety of the vaccines as well as its efficacy here in South Korea. And we believe that this can also contribute to upgrading and enhancing the quality of our country's health-related and welfare-related policies. We believe that it is very important that the public exerts a sense of perseverance and active participation in the government's quarantine measures. And thanks to your effort, we were able to contain the virus to a large extent. However, we are seeing daily cases hovering from 400, that is, to 700 right now. And we believe that this is a very important time that we go back to the basics. We ask you to wear your face mask at all times and keep to social distancing measures, and also refrain from having social gatherings of 5 or more people. And if you have any suspected symptoms, please get tested as soon as possible by visiting a nearby screening clinic. And also, this is very important to stem the infection to your family members as well. Moreover, please note that at facilities that have poor ventilation or that are frequented by people, please refrain from going to these places and let us safeguard our own health.
Right, that was Chung Young with Thursday's afternoon briefing. So what did she have to say?
She had a lot of updates on the vaccination front. She said until this Thursday, 5.5% of the nation's population has received at least a shot of the vaccination. So today, Thursday, the set goal, the government's goal of 3 million by the end of April could be achieved. And she also had some new guidelines regarding people who are fully vaccinated. So if a person who's been fully vaccinated comes in contact with a COVID-19 patient, that person, and tests negative, that person does not have to go into mandatory self-isolation for 2 weeks. And also that goes for people who travel abroad and return to Korea. If they have been fully vaccinated, they do not have to go into a 14 self-isolation period, except for those who come from countries that have the South African variant. And also there were some updates on the Drug Ministry's recent approval of under condition of the self-test kits. Tong said that these should be used for supplementary reasons, and if you test positive, you should get tested for a PCR test again. If you test negative after getting a test through the self-testing kit, you should still monitor your condition and abide by antivirus measures. And she also stressed that people should take care of hygiene, personal hygiene, before using such test kits.
Right, so as always, then thank you for that.
Anytime.
Right, hand sanitizers and household disinfectants have become an essential part of life amid the pandemic as part of prevention efforts aimed at keeping the virus at bay. However, the overuse of these products may lead to more harm than good. We have details in this report.
Personal hygiene has become a key focus in our fight against COVID-19, including the frequent washing of hands and proper mask wearing. These routines have yielded unexpected benefits of not only stemming the transmission of COVID-19, but also preventing other infectious diseases. But excessive cleaning and disinfection could also lead to negative health consequences. In the case of hand sanitizers, using them too frequently can lead to dry and chapped skin and even dermatitis.
알코올 성분이 지방을 녹이는 효과를 갖고 있고, 그렇기 때문에 손에 갖고 있는 수분감을 떨어뜨리고 방어 능력을 떨어뜨리기 때문에 대부분 건조함, 가려움, 따가움과 함께 동반되는 자극성 접촉 피부염, 그다음에 또 다른 증상은 손 세정제 안에 들어가 있는 특정 알레르긴 성분 때문에 의한 알레르기 접촉 피부염이 올 수 있고.
There are also concerns over the liberal use of chemical disinfectants, which have seen wide application amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The disinfectants often contain chemical compounds that can cause irritations in the eyes, nose, and the respiratory tract, among other negative human health effects.
주요 기능은 가구나 벽과 같은 어떤 특정 물체의 표면이나 인체에 붙은 코로나 바이러스를 죽이거나 증식을 억제함으로써 전파를 차단하는 것이고 이러한 기능은 세균이나 바이러스의 막 성분과의 뛰어난 결합력에서 발생이 됩니다. 이 뛰어난 막 결합력이 우리 인체를 구성하는 세포막에도 작동될 수 있다는 것이고
The heavy use of disinfectants can also have serious consequences for the environment, a view backed by many experts in the field.
The tons of metrics of the isopropylene and isopropyls and the other disinfectant were spilled over the surfaces to curb the virus. But if we see these disinfectant drains into the water bodies, and that water that could be lethal for the aquatic life, as well as if we use this water for the agricultural purposes, so it can harm our crops.
Disinfectant resistance is a relatively new problem. The problem with disinfectant resistance is many of the mechanisms also play a role in antibiotic resistance. So the genes involved in disinfectant resistance are often found on genetic islands. And these islands, there's also genes for antibiotic resistance. And then these genes, these islands are transferable. So the more development you get of disinfectant resistance, the easier it is for antibiotic resistance to spread to bacteria as well.
So what's the best way to use disinfectants in a safe and effective manner? For one, you should always wear a mask and slip on a pair of gloves to avoid any direct contact with a disinfectant. You must only use products that have been approved by the government. Apply them in small amounts that are recommended in their labels, and make sure to ventilate the area afterwards.
제품에 적혀 있는 용량을 어떻게 써라, 얼마만큼 써라라고 결정하는 그 단계는 살균 소독제로서의 기능하고 그 다음에 인체 안전성을 고려할 때 가장 적합하다고 판단된 농도입니다. 따라서 제품에 적혀 있는 용법 용량을 반드시 지켜서 사용하시는 것을 권장드리고 싶고요. 이 제품을 어떻게 쓰느냐에 따라서 인체에 대한 안전성은 결정되는 것이라고 생각됩니다.
Disinfectants are one of our best weapons in our fight against COVID-19. But as with any other weapon, they must be handled carefully to maximize the benefits they offer while keeping their potential hazards to a minimum.
You come to Alaska, and this will start on June 1st. If you come to Alaska, you get a free vaccination, if you want one.
The administration is looking at options to share American-made AstraZeneca vaccine doses during the next few months.
The unequal distribution of COVID-19 vaccines is challenging global efforts to end the pandemic. For more on this troubling reality and on the possible countermeasures, I have Dr. Kim Seung-taek from Institute Pasteur Korea. Welcome back, Dr. Kim.
Good afternoon.
And I also have Dr. Deborah Gleason at La Trobe University joining this session virtually. It's a pleasure to have you with us again, Dr. Gleason.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Right then, Dr. Kim, during talks earlier this week, President Moon Jae-in and the CEO of Novavax, Stanley Ek, agreed to expand collaboration on the vaccine front. Let's begin with your thoughts on efforts such as these by authorities here to secure more vaccines.
Well, I think it's a pretty good movement. And then number one is, as you said, is securing more vaccines. And also we are actually securing more different type of platform. Just a vaccine. The prior ones is actually based on the messenger RNA-based vaccines, which is just a Pfizer or Moderna. And then the second one, AstraZeneca, this is a adenovirus vector vaccine. But now this Novavax is a total different platform. This is a protein subunit vaccine. And in terms of methodology, this type of platform was successfully actually used for hepatitis B vaccine or papillomavirus vaccine. So compared to the the vaccine platform, in terms of safety, this is very well established. So I think this is pretty good just movement, the numbers of just the doses and then a different type of the platform. Because somehow, maybe if some manufacturer did not actually just succeed to just supply the enough number of the doses, we have to just think about always just some alternative sources of the vaccine suppliers. So in terms of such kind of just securing just enough number of suppliers, I think this is pretty good just a movement.
Right. Meanwhile, Dr. Gleeson, I understand about 3% of Australia's population of 25 million have received the first dose. Tell us a bit about the rollout of vaccines in Australia and the timeline to herd immunity.
Well, as of the 27th of April, just over 2 million doses had been administered in Australia for our population of 25 million. So the vaccine rollout is quite far behind schedule and it's been plagued with problems so far. First, we had supply blockages for vaccines which were meant to be arriving from Europe, and shipments of 3.1 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine on order from Europe have not been delivered to Australia. These were meant to fill the gap until CSL was able to supply sufficient vaccine through onshore manufacturing of the AstraZeneca vaccine. So CSL is due to produce 50 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine within Australia. But recently the decision was made to make the Pfizer vaccine the recommended option for people aged under 50. Which is an issue because the AstraZeneca vaccine was planned to be the backbone of Australia's vaccination program. So the government subsequently increased its order for the Pfizer vaccine to 40 million doses to fill that gap, but 20 million of those are not expected to arrive in the country until the third quarter of 2021. So due to these disruptions in supply, the government hasn't set new targets for vaccinating the adult population at this stage, and it seems unlikely that we'll reach herd immunity by the end of 2021.
I see. Meanwhile, Dr. Kim, what can you tell us about the worsening COVID-19 situation in countries that lack vaccines as opposed to those that have them?
Well, in reality, actually, some countries, as you said, some experience some surplus of the vaccines, while some others has actually suffer from the shortage. And this is the real world situation. In the beginning, well, there was some, but this is not actually just on those unprecedented just the cases. We have actually experienced a very similar kind of situation in the prior pandemic as well. So securing the vaccines is pretty just important business. And then I think just the government also trying to secure enough number of vaccine doses and also for sometimes therapeutics. For example, in the previously when the remdesivir was actually approved in the US for the first time, emergency use authorization, many countries actually trying to just secure remdesivir. But the actually production was not really easy, and then somehow US that time was just to try to use remdesivir by their own just use it at the time. So that was not really just unprecedented cases, but in international levels, there was some movement for just equal distribution of the vaccine, for example, like a COVAX, just a movement of facilities. But then at the same time, in this real world, many countries actually trying to get their own vaccines. And this is called, such as like a vaccine nationalism. So we have to always consider this is the real world situation and to just try to get our own, whether it is a development, well, this is just ideal cases, and also just the securing the enough number of the vaccine doses for their own countries, the people. Yeah.
Right. And against that backdrop, Dr. Gleeson, there is talk about booster shots to maximize protection against COVID-19. First, as a medical scholar yourself, Dr. Gleeson, do you believe booster shots are necessary?
Actually, my expertise is not in medicine. It's in trade agreements and public health. So I'll leave that question because doesn't fall within my area of expertise.
Then. Let me rephrase that question then, Dr. Gleeson. Do you believe efforts to procure booster shots then might aggravate supply shortages?
Yes, we're already seeing rich countries starting to order extra doses of the Pfizer vaccine to prepare for booster shots, and this will put further pressure on suppliers in an environment where rich countries have already pre-purchased much of the available supply. COVAX, the global program for equitable distribution of vaccines, is already being crippled by inadequate supply, and it's far behind its goal of distributing 2 billion doses by the end of 2021. So only 49 million doses have been shipped to 120 countries so far. So we could even see young, healthy people in rich countries fully vaccinated and even receiving booster shots before health workers and vulnerable groups are vaccinated in low-income countries.
Dr. Gleeson, according to company releases, AstraZeneca will deliver 3 billion doses this year and Pfizer will deliver 2.5 billion. Is there a way to further perhaps boost production?
So a lot of the supply of the AstraZeneca vaccines being manufactured by the Serum Institute of India, but the Serum Institute's been facing shortages of raw materials, partly due to hoarding of these in the US. And fortunately, the Biden administration agreed this week that it would start releasing raw materials to India to boost the vaccine supply. A bigger problem is that vaccine producers like Pfizer are not sharing their know-how and technology sufficiently with other companies so that global production can be increased sufficiently to meet the global demand. So we've got a situation where a handful of pharmaceutical companies are controlling the global supply and hanging on tightly to their intellectual property and the information that's needed to manufacture the vaccines. And this means that governments will need to take more action to provide incentives for pharmaceutical companies to share or to force them to share if the incentives aren't enough.
Right. Meanwhile, Dr. Kim, further complicating matters is that Pfizer recently confirmed the presence of fake versions of its COVID-19 vaccines in Mexico and Poland. Now, do remind us about the dangers posed by the presence of such fake vaccines in the market.
Well, I don't know how many different kinds of the counterfeit, just the fake vaccines that exist right now. But one thing that I have heard is a saline solution. So this saline solution itself actually does not harm just the people. It's just just the salt. Salt. But then the potential problem is that the people who just got shot just by this the vaccine, they just believe that they are actually protected from the COVID-19 disease. So the potential problem is that they could just transmit the viruses, while they are actually, sometimes if they are like asymptomatic, just COVID-19 patient, they can just move around and then transmit the viruses. So they actually just pose as potential problems of some public health situation.
Right. Yeah. Dr. Gleeson, the US state of Alaska, as seen in our video earlier on, is offering free vaccines for visitors to its state starting in June. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, the desperation to get tourism going again and get economies moving is really understandable, but it's important that vaccines go to the people that need them the most. And as a global community, we need to be vaccinating health workers and vulnerable groups around the world before we start handing out vaccines to tourists as incentives to travel. Countries that take a me-first approach to vaccinating their own populations are also shooting themselves in the foot, so to speak, because just vaccinating their own populations won't be enough. Variants that emerge in areas of uncontrolled transmission could threaten the whole world's recovery from the pandemic. So all countries need to be thinking about the global context here and making sure that they're doing enough to ensure that the whole world can be vaccinated.
Right, and perhaps with Dr. Gleeson's thoughts in mind, the US recently, Dr. Kim, voiced intentions to share 60 million of its AstraZeneca vaccine with countries in need. Now, 20 million doses will go to India. What are your thoughts on such intentions?
Well, I think just sharing the surplus, the vaccines with the other countries, by itself is just good, just a movement. But then I also think that this is also just happening for the countries with enough dose of the vaccine. For example, this could just happen in US and also probably Israel and probably Canada But I think Canada may not, their vaccination is not fully just accomplished yet. But according to some prior some press release, they have more than enough just a number of just doses of vaccine for their just own people. So then they can just estimate how many just vaccine doses are actually just enough for their own countries, and they probably just start to share just the vaccines earlier than this movement. But I think this is anyway, this is a good movement, and then this has to be actually just spread more countries, and then actually just terminating, just ending this pandemic does not just accomplish. It's not actually accomplished by only one country. It has to be just vaccination should be done all over those countries in global just scale.
Right. Dr. Kim, I understand passive immunity via antibody-containing blood products is emerging as a viable alternative amid the shortage in vaccines. Could you tell us a bit about this?
Well, this is a monoclonal antibody, sometimes called a therapeutic antibody. And then this is pretty successful just drug development so far. And after emergency use authorization last year, actually two U.S. companies, Eli Lilly and Regeneron, they actually conducted phase 3 clinical trials. And I think it's not actually really just finished yet, but so far the result is pretty good. I think maybe just 80% or so. These monoclonal antibodies will actually successfully just diminish the progression to the severe COVID-19 disease, also just decreases number of deaths. So this drug has to be just administered to the people with some moderate or just mild cases of COVID-19. But these monoclonal antibodies also can be used for prophylactic purpose as well as the therapeutic purposes. So I want to just compare just a vaccination in two different terms. One is a passive vaccination, and then the other is active vaccination. The active vaccination is that what we usually call just a vaccine that we just talked about, like AstraZeneca, Pfizer. Those are active vaccination because we just administer the vaccine. Mostly this is just we actually deliver the antigen, whether it is just a spike gene or spike protein itself. So then our body actually reacts to this antigen by generating the antibodies and also just raising some T-cell immunity. But then there are some type of people who cannot respond to this type of vaccine. For example, like some immune-compromised people, they cannot actually generate antibodies and even just do not just raise T-cell responses. So in this case, we have to just give those people as a passive means. So monoclonal antibodies, so we actually just administer monoclonal antibody to this type of people, and that sort of just mimicking some immune status in these people. But then this is actually pretty good method. And then these monoclonal antibodies, its half-life is pretty just stable, just long, sometimes like more than 6 months or so. And then some advanced version of monoclonal antibody sometimes can last up to 1 year. So this is pretty just good method as some prophylactic purpose. But the main question in this case is that monoclonal antibodies is always have these two different issues. One is mass production. It's not really easy, and also cost issues. So active vaccination, in terms of cost, this is much just affordable. But this passive vaccination is pretty expensive. So if we have to somehow prioritize which people should get this monoclonal antibody as a passive vaccination, probably the people with some underlying diseases, and also some older people, and then generally the people with some high risk.
I see. Dr. Gleason, what do you propose to address the inequality in vaccine distribution as wealthier countries seek to hoard supplies?
Well, tomorrow there's an important meeting at the World Trade Organization to discuss a proposal that's been made by India and South Africa to waive intellectual property rights for COVID-19 vaccines and other medical products that are needed to fight the pandemic. And this proposal was made in October last year, and it's now being supported by more than 100 of the World Trade Organization's 164 member states, but it's being blocked by some rich countries. And the success of this proposal is really critical to ramping up global production of COVID-19 vaccines in low and middle income countries. So my hope is that more countries will lend their support to that proposal and that pharmaceutical companies will be forced to share their intellectual property, their know-how and their technology so that we can see more of these vaccines manufactured around the world.
Right. Hopefully we'll see people pushing aside their patents for the good of the world then. All right, Dr. Gleeson, as always, thank you very much for your thoughts. And Dr. Kim, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much.
The saying goes that sharing is caring, and the pandemic is providing us with the perfect chance to put the wisdom of those words into practice via vaccines. Thank you for watching.
As we enter mid-spring, people are spending more time outdoors. More contact among people means a higher risk of virus transmission. Make it your priority to protect yourself from COVID-19. Make sure to wear a mask. Maintain a safe distance of 2 meters. Take precautions at restaurants, cafes, and other multi-use facilities. Upon returning home, check for respiratory symptoms and a fever. Get tested for COVID-19 if you show symptoms. Avoid non-essential gatherings. No place is safe from COVID-19. Everyone's participation is needed to minimize the risk of infection in springtime. Overcoming COVID-19 together. Let's all stick to the basics.
Diplomats residing in Korea all have their special stories to tell. We want to extend this invitation with all of our viewers. They all share one common role, being a bridge between Korea and their respective countries. Tune in to the in-depth interviews as we discuss politics, economy, social issues, culture, history, and more. Diplomat Talks. What are some popular economic trends in Korea? BizTech Korea brings you different content in diverse formats. Some segments include LabTube, where we introduce promising